Hi, this is Simon Meacher from Engaging Data, and in this video we're going to discuss the various ways you can configure Git with WhereScape 3D. So the biggest benefits of using Git and CI/CD with WhereScape is that you gain an extra layer of auditing. You can see which developer committed what code into which repository, and it gives you a target point to quickly and easily retrieve that code back and restore it into your repository. This allows developers to easily share and distribute their code across multiple repositories, across multiple teams, and to elaborate and collaborate on data models. Also, using Git in this way with CI/CD pipelines will help you to create deployment processes that are highly repeatable and robust, to include things like testing, peer reviews on the code to ensure the highest quality of code is meeting your requirements and getting into production. So we're often asked, will this work for us? And in short, yes it will. There's not a one-size-fits-all solution, as many companies have different ways of branching and merging code to tagging code in a Git repository that may differ from other organizations. You may have a slightly different development lifecycle to another company, so then it just comes down to tailoring the solution to make sure it works inside of your organization. WhereScape have developed a command line function that can be used to integrate the export and import of code from the WhereScape repository into a Git repository. This command line function is used to help integrate or build workflows or pipelines around your Git repository and your WhereScape repositories in order to build out your fully fledged CI/CD processes. So now we're going to walk through a few scenarios and a few various options of how to configure WhereScape with a Git repository. So in this first option, we have a typical setup for WhereScape 3D. We have a shared repository that many developers will connect to. So this will be for a relatively small team or a small department working very closely together over, where they talk to each other about kind of changes they're doing, and that close connectivity enables them to prevent any collision. From this shared repository, either together or individually, they can push out changes from their WhereScape 3D repository into the Git repository. WhereScape 3D, in essence, is being backed up because all the models are going out into Git. So in this option, WhereScape 3D has been set up in a slightly more mature way. Rather than having a single repository that lots of developers coordinate in, we have smaller repositories at a team or an individual level that will then push changes via the XML files into a central repository. So this helps us to break down developer responsibility or control access over source systems in a slightly different way. It can also break down the entire data model into smaller parts that the developers can play with and can operate on in their individual repository. The master repository becomes a peer review collaboration tool that helps to coordinate all of the changes into the middle, ensure everything is robust and checked before being pushed off into Git. In this setup, you would typically use this in a case where your developers or your teams are acting remotely and you want to use Git as the communication method of sending data models into Git before being received into the master model. So here we have individual repositories for a developer or a team or potentially a data modeler, and those repositories will have their own data models that may require user access level to the source systems, but all of the models will be pushed into Git and could be retrieved from Git. So this will enable developers to collaborate on data models, to take copies of existing models, make adjustments before committing them back to the Git repository. And then from here, the Git repository will be used to send those models into the master repository where the standard checks and balances can be made to ensure the entire data warehouse or all data models don't clash and there's no changes to any common objects. And again, that can be moved directly into Git. In some instances, customers have elected to use this kind of methodology, but rather than going straight to a WhereScape 3D master repository, they push the changes directly into WhereScape Red that then turns their conceptual data model into a physical one on their target platform where they can do more checks and balances and start the engineering work within WhereScape Red. In this model, the WhereScape 3D repositories have been linked directly to a Git repository, and this could be done for several different reasons. The first is if you're operating in a data mesh kind of environment where each data model is a product in its own right, and therefore you have a separate repository for that data model rather than one repository for your entire data warehouse or all data models. So this option will enable developers to connect to the repository, pull down the data model, play with it in WhereScape 3D and push it back up, and then continue to collaborate in those sorts of ways. This setup enables you to control the developer's access not only to the data models but to the source systems. So this offers you far more options and flexibility in the way that you create and provide access to your developers. Again, this has a master WhereScape 3D repository that pulls in all of the data models from the various Git repositories. This will be used to ensure there's no changes on common objects that may cause problems before we go into WhereScape Red. You could opt to not go into WhereScape 3D. You could opt to go into WhereScape Red and continue the development of your data model within the Red platform. Another thing to consider is how you control the WhereScape settings and configuration. What we've demonstrated here is that actually you can create pipelines to pull out the configuration settings of WhereScape Red and WhereScape 3D. On screen you can see this example where you're showing what you would do inside of WhereScape 3D. And you would push that into Git, and then from there you could create pipelines to take that configuration and push it out to other repositories, or simply just hold it inside of Git to be pulled down at a later stage. This is extremely beneficial to do, especially if you're working with model conversion rules or templates or workflows, and you'd want to be able to save the changes you're making to your central repository into Git for, again, audit purposes or just a nice safe place to store a restore. So those were our examples of how to integrate WhereScape 3D into Git using CI/CD processes. We haven't covered off pipelines that help to migrate code from WhereScape 3D to WhereScape Red, but we will cover that off in a separate video. The important thing to remember is WhereScape is flexible and can adapt to your processes. The command line can be used to create and automate any kind of workflow or checks and balances that you need to have in your organization. You have the freedom to develop the process that is suitable for you and your company, and to make something robust and easy to use and seamless for the developer. So what do you think? Do you have any questions? Do you have any comments? Post them in the comments below. If you're new here, please subscribe to the channel. If you liked the video and you found it useful, give it a thumbs up. We have more videos like this coming up. We're going to discuss CI/CD pipelines in the next video. Hopefully you'll find that useful. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day.